The host of On Contact with RT. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Hedges.
Thank you. The ruling elites, terrified by the mobilization of the left in the 1960s, or by what Samuel Huntington called America's built counter-institutions to delegitimize and marginalize critics of corporate capitalism and imperialism. They bought the allegiances of the two main political parties. They imposed ideological obedience to the neoliberal agenda within academia and the press, laid out by Lewis Powell in his 1971 memorandum, Attack on American Free Enterprise System, was the blueprint for the creeping corporate coup d'etat that 45 years later is complete. The destruction of democratic institutions, places where the citizen has agency and a voice, is far graver than the ascendancy to the White House of the demagogue Donald Trump. The coup destroyed our two-party system. It destroyed labor unions. It destroyed public education. It destroyed the judiciary. It destroyed the press. It destroyed academia. It destroyed consumer and environmental protection. It destroyed our industrial base. It destroyed communities and cities. And it has destroyed the lives of tens of millions of Americans, no longer able to find work that provides a living wage, cursed to live in chronic poverty, or locked in cages in our monstrous system of mass incarceration. This coup has also destroyed the credibility of liberal democracy. Self-identified liberals, such as the Clintons or Barack Obama, mouthed the words of liberal democratic values while making war on those values in the service of corporate power. The revolt we see rippling across the country is a revolt not only against a corporate system that has betrayed workers, but also, for many, liberal democracy itself. This is very dangerous. It will allow the radical right under a Trump administration to rapidly cement into place an Americanized fascism. Ignorance allied with power, James Baldwin wrote, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. It turns out 45 years later that those who truly hate us for our freedoms are not the array of dehumanized enemies cooked up by the war machine, the Vietnamese, Cambodians, Afghans, Iraqis, Iranians, or even the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. They are the financiers, bankers, politicians, public intellectuals and pundits, lawyers, journalists, and business people, cultivated in the elite universities and business schools, who sold us the utopian dream of neoliberalism. We are entering the twilight phase of capitalism. Wealth is no longer created by producing or manufacturing. It is created by manipulating the prices of stocks and commodities and imposing a crippling debt peonage on the public. Our casino capitalism has merged with the gambling industry. The entire system is parasitic. It is designed to prey on the desperate, students burdened by loans, underpaid workers burdened by credit card debt and mortgages, towns and cities forced to borrow to maintain municipal services. Casino magnates such as Sheldon Adelson and hedge fund managers such as Robert Mercer add nothing of value to society. They do not generate money, but redistribute it upwards to the 1%. They use lobbyists and campaign contributions to build monopolies. This is how the drug company Mylan raised the price of the EpiPen used to treat allergy reactions from $57 in 2007 to $500. To rewrite the laws and regulations, they have given themselves the legal power to carry out a tax boycott, loot the U.S. Treasury, close factories, send jobs overseas, gut social service programs, and impose austerity. They have at the same time militarized our police, built the most sophisticated security and surveillance apparatus in human history, and taken from us our civil liberties by judicial fiat. They are ready, should we rise up in defiance. These mandarins are, if we speak in the language of God and country, traitors. They are parasites. Financial speculation in 17th century England was a crime. Speculators were hanged. The heads of most of the banks and hedge funds, the executives of large corporations such as Walmart and Gap, that run sweatshop death traps for impoverished workers overseas, deserve prison far more than most of the poor students of color who never had a fair chance in life and who I teach within our prison system. When a tiny cabal seizes power, monarchist, communist, fascist, or corporate, it creates a mafia economy and a mafia state. Donald Trump is not an anomaly. He is the grotesque visage of a collapsed democracy. Trump and his coterie of billionaires, generals, half-wits, Christian fascists, criminals, racists, and deviants play the role of William Faulkner's Snopes clan. The Snopeses in Faulkner's novels ruthlessly seized control from the degenerated former slave-holding aristocratic elites. Flem Snopes and his extended family, which included a killer, a pedophile, a bigamist, an arsonist, a mentally disabled man who copulates with a cow, and a relative who sells tickets to witness the bestiality, are fictional representations of the scum now elevated to the highest level of the federal government. They embody the moral rot unleashed by decay and unfettered capitalism. The usual reference to amorality, while accurate, is not sufficiently distinctive and by itself does not allow us to place them, as they should be placed, in a historical moment. The critic Irving Howe wrote of the Snopeses. Perhaps the most important thing to be said is that they are what comes afterwards, the creatures that emerge from the devastation with the slime still upon their lips. Let a world collapse in the South or Russia, and there appear figures of coarse ambition, driving their way up from beneath the social bottom, men to whom moral claims are not so much as absurd as incomprehensible, sons of bushwhackers and Muziks drifting in from nowhere and taking over through the sheer outrageousness of their monolithic force. They become presidents of local banks and chairmen of party regional committees, and later, a trifle slicked up, they muscle their way into Congress or the Politburo. Scavengers without inhibition. They need not believe in the crumbling official code of their society. They need only learn to mimic its sounds. What comes next, history has shown, will not be pleasant. A corrupt and inept ruling elite, backed by the organs of state security and law enforcement, will unleash a naked kleptocracy. Workers will become serfs. The most benign dissent will be criminalized. The ravaging of the ecosystem will propel us towards extinction. Hate talk will call for attacks against Muslims, undocumented workers, African Americans, feminists, intellectuals, artists, dissidents, who will be scapegoated for the country's stagnation. Magical thinking will dominate our airwaves and be taught in our public schools. Art and culture will be degraded to nationalist kitsch. All the cultural and intellectual disciplines that allow us to view the world from the perspective of the other, that foster empathy, understanding, and compassion, will be replaced by a grotesque and cruel hypermasculinity and hypermilitarism. Racism, bigotry, misogyny, and homophobia will be validated by those in power. Our only hope now is an unwavering non-cooperation with the systems of corporate control. We must rebuild new democratic institutions from the ground up. We must not be seduced into trusting the power elites, including the Democratic Party, with 7 leading candidates to be the next chair of the Democratic National Committee demonstrated the other night at George Washington University that they have no interest in defying corporate power or backing democratic populism. And we must also acknowledge our own failures on the left, our elitism, arrogance, and refusal to root our politics in local communities. Rosa Luxemburg understood that unless we first address the most pressing economic and physical needs of the destitute, we will never gain credibility or build a resistance movement. Revolt, she said, is achieved only by establishing genuine relationships with the oppressed, including with people who do not think like us. Successful revolt surges up from below. Politics is a game of fear. Those who do not make power elites afraid do not succeed. All the movements that opened up the democratic space in America, the abolitionists, suffragists, communists, socialists, anarchists, and the labor and civil rights movements developed a critical mass and militancy that forced the centers of power to respond. The platitudes about justice, equality, and democracy are just that. Only when power is threatened does it react. Appealing to its better nature is useless. It doesn't have one. We once had within our capitalist democracy liberal institutions, the press, labor unions, third parties, civic and church groups, public broadcasting, well-funded public universities, and a liberal wing of the Democratic Party that were capable of responding to outside pressure from movements. They did so imperfectly. They provided only enough reforms to save the capitalist system from widespread unrest or with a breakdown of capitalism in the 1930s from revolution. They never addressed white supremacy and institutional racism or the cruelty that is endemic to capitalism. But they had the ability to ameliorate the suffering of working men and women. This safety valve no longer works, and when reform becomes impossible, revolution becomes inevitable. The days ahead will be dark and frightening, but as Immanuel Kant reminded us, if justice perishes, human life on earth has lost its meaning. We fight for the sacred. We fight for life. It is a fight we must not lose. To be a bystander is to be complicit in radical evil. Revolt is a political necessity. It is a moral imperative. It is a defense of the sacred, and it alone makes hope possible. The moment we defy power, we are victorious. The moment we stand alongside the oppressed and accept being treated like the oppressed, we are victorious. The moment we hold up a flickering light in the darkness for others to see, we are victorious. The moment we thwart the building of a pipeline or a fracking site, we are victorious. And the moment those in power become frightened of us, we are victorious. I do not know if we can build a better society. I do not even know if we will survive as a species. But I know these corporate forces have us by the throat, and they have my children by the throat. I do not fight fascists because I will win. I fight fascists because they are fascists. Thank you.